Me.
Yes, it did.
Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Hey, thank you very much for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook, our last for 2022 and the last of our 36th year here on 9PBS. Next week, we begin year number 37. Thanks to your support. Let's meet the panelists assembled around our big table, starting with Wendy Wiese from the Big 550 KTRS, who started her career full-time at KMOX in 1986 before Donnybrook, as it turns out.
I'm a dinosaur.
One of our founders here in 1987. Bill McClellan was here in January of that year. Now he's with the Post-Dispatch and STLtoday.com. Ray Hartmann, one of our founders from RawStory.com, the Riverfront Times, and the Big 550. Tomorrow night, his last broadcast after 4 great years. Don't miss that one. And from the St. Louis American with sartorial splendor, he's a columnist and news editor, Mr. Alvin Reid. And we're going to...
First New Year's resolution, everybody. America, cheer the heck up. That's what I'm doing today.
That's what you're doing.
Well, thank you for
It ain't that bad.
But first, the bad news.
Yeah, here we go.
I think finally, Alvin, Southwest is going to have its schedule, Southwest Airlines at Lambert, pretty much on track tomorrow. That's the plan anyway. But as of yesterday, even though the bad weather was a week ago, as of yesterday, Wednesday, half the flights were still being canceled. People have lost luggage. They have pharmaceuticals and clothing, which they don't know where it is. And some people trying to get to Oklahoma City have spent 4 or 5 days in St. Louis. It's been a disaster. Now, the question is, what ramifications should lie ahead for Southwest Airlines?
Well, okay. I think there are such things, and if I were one of these folks stranded at the airport or I couldn't get my luggage, I would be upset, okay? But, however, I am going to say this, and I mean it sincerely. You're flying during the holidays. You're flying at a time where there's the probably biggest storm in the last 150 years going on, so people just couldn't get here and they couldn't get there, and they got stranded, and luggage got backed up. I understand it. It's Southwest Airlines. It could have happened to any airline, but it is Southwest Airlines, and we fly Southwest because we could maybe save a little bit of money, you know. So I feel for people, but at the same time, I mean, it's a rough time to be traveling. And in July, when you make reservations over the holidays, they do say, you know, a lot of stuff happens at the holidays. So,
Alvin is too kind. I mean, now the pilots union and the transport workers and the flight attendants say that for years they've been telling Southwest that their computer system is outdated and they got to do something new, and the bosses just took it as a profit center and didn't update the equipment. And it isn't like this worst storm in the last 150 years shut everybody down, Alvin. I mean, it was pretty much Southwest. And so I think that the big bosses, there should be a price to pay for this.
And the number 85 comes to mind. It was 85% of the cancellations last week were one airline, Southwest. And it doesn't have anywhere near 85% of the flights. And I think that's its problem. Now, they are regulated in a sense by the federal government, or certainly you have to report. And we'll see. Normally, the federal bureaucracy can't get out of its own way. Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, has indicated, and hopefully he'll follow up, that they intend to monitor Southwest's commitment to make good.
To rectify,
and the interesting thing, one thing I want to add, normally CEOs are not quick enough to take responsibility and do their mea culpas. I thought the guy at Southwest may have gone too far. I mean, his mea culpas kind of fell flat for me because he almost, I mean, he admitted it was their fault and was kind of grovelly about it. I didn't think it came off. I like that, but I didn't think it came off that well.
Fortunately, we have the attention span of hummingbirds thanks to technology. Yes. And what you just said, Alvin, I think is always going to be the banner headline. They will I'm sure they will rebound from this. It will probably take a while. I agree with you. A lot of people who travel over the holidays know that this is a possibility because the weather is so unpredictable, especially now. I think eventually Southwest will be okay. It's going to take a while.
Well, I
It's going to
think
take a while.
you know what?
But they'll be
my wife and I we were irate until we got the 2 domestic flights for free any place in the United States. Then I wasn't mad no more.
Pete Buttigieg was using some pretty strong language. So
And
he
he should.
Let's move on. Ray Hartmann, the census came out with figures this week, and I actually noted that last year at this time, we noticed how Illinois population had gone down. And in the last year, July 21 to July 22, went down another 100,000 residents. It's been hemorrhaging residents for quite some time, along with states like New York and California, and they're going to places like Florida and Texas, the Carolinas, Georgia, and Tennessee. But do you think that the high tax rate and blue state regulation is the reason people are fleeing Illinois?
No, I mean, I don't know why they might. There's a lot of factors. Certainly, there are geography and weather factors, but I think it's one of the least important statistics, unless you happen to have a job in economic development for the state. If you look at the bottom 10 states, and this is, it said, oh, it's red state, blue state. No, they're both. The lowest 10 states in population, just happen to look it up. On the red state side, there's the Dakotas, Wyoming, Montana. None of those, I've been able to go, nobody in those states wants more people there. On the blue state side, you've got the New England states. You've got Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. You know, those states, too, have great quality of life. They don't want more people. So I just think it's a statistic that doesn't have any meaning.
I agree. I think that you have an aging population in terms of percentages that we've certainly haven't seen in our lifetime, probably. And I think that has a lot to do with the migration south. I wouldn't be too concerned about the state of Illinois. Chicago is still a toddling town, and everything east of St. Louis, I mean, they are booming. They are still booming in St. Clair County and other places.
Actually, with all due respect, Metro East is also losing residents.
Losing,
it's the biggest loss in our area. Now, it's a concern, though, Ray, because you want people to be in restaurants and bars and providing, working and generating taxes so you can pay for schools and highways.
But where are
you don't want population loss.
Well, I mean, but if you take these 100,000 people, until you literally show me where these 100,000 people lived, okay? Because basically, it sounds like you're saying, well, small towns are doing fine, and they're all voting, you know, red state and all that, but they're not losing. So the big major metropolitan areas, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, they're losing residents. I don't think it's easy to get a reservation at a restaurant in New York now because people are fleeing.
Well, I think the pandemic did have something to do with what happened in New York, what we saw with the people leaving New York.
I think the following happened. I think in 2017, that Trump tax law said that you could only write off $10,000 on your state and local taxes. And a lot of people with money in places like New York and California and Chicago are saying, we can save a lot of money by going to a state that has low state.
I do not think people. I just don't.
And less crime.
I don't have any data, but I don't to back it up. But I just intuitively, I don't think people move to another state, rip up their existence just to save money. Now, if they are of a certain age and decide I want to get out of the hustle and bustle and retire to the Sun Belt or retire to Florida, I'm not saying that if one of those states doesn't have income tax, it might affect them. But I don't think that's not why people migrate.
All the states around Illinois, except Michigan, had population increases.
But
so are you?
People don't migrate because of looking up
if
tax
Illinois
rates.
might be doing something wrong?
Well, how about Minnesota? How did Minnesota do?
I believe it's up. Wisconsin's up.
Okay.
Illinois is not the only high tax state.
I mean, wait. So people, you're just basically saying taxes and people just hate Illinois, so they're all just like leaving. I mean,
I still hear from people about the booming construction in St. Clair County, and you're saying that St. Clair County is losing.
The Metro East is flat to
But
death.
that doesn't. I mean, Albin's doing fine. I just don't think. I just don't.
Heights is losing people.
How about you, Wendy Wiese? A week or so ago, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, spoke to a joint session in Congress. The junior senator from the great state of Missouri, Josh Hawley, decided not to attend. He said he didn't want to be part of a photo op, and he's concerned that Ukraine is not properly accounting for the monies that we're sending over there after they've been invaded by Russia, as you know, being bombed out. Now, I think the man's entitled to his opinions, but in the sense of decency, it's a historic moment during wartime, of visiting presidents coming to Washington. Couldn't he just sit there and listen quietly and politely? And isn't that the civil thing to do?
I think he is leaning in to his persona. I really think that's what he's doing. I think he's not trying to modify it at this point. He has a lot of people who think that he is going to be the next big thing, whether you think he will or not. But I think the whole fist pump and January 6th and all of that, he's basically saying he's unapologetic, that he represents a large swath of people in 2023 who don't think that we should be giving money hand over fist, no matter what the humanitarian crisis. I know that it's an appalling thing to say.
Well, you know, I think you have to look at the fact that he supports Vladimir Putin.
Well, that too.
I mean, when Finland and Sweden came into NATO, he was the only senator, one person in the entire Senate who said, no, we don't want to strengthen NATO. He said, what? And he always has a reason, and he said, well, we should be concentrating on China. And people said, well, wait a minute. If NATO is strengthened, we can spend more time worrying about China. I mean, he does not want to do anything to upset Putin.
He didn't want to be part of a photo op, so he made himself part of a, mouth op, you know, running his mouth. Yes. And like I said, and, you know, like, Josh Hawley, okay, they're probably having a tough time keeping track of records because they're getting rocketed every 5 minutes. I mean, it's just so silly. Yeah, run, because the first commercial I'd run against him is when he was running away for his life while people in there trying to save others. So just take it with a grain of salt in that's Josh Hawley just being Josh Hawley.
And he is politically astute. I
Yes,
will give
he
you
is.
that. One of the very first stories written nationally, I'm trying to remember which publication it was writing about him, said, and this is a national publication, that the most dangerous place in Washington is between Josh Hawley and a camera, or a microphone, whatever. And I mean, he has a unique knack of getting himself attention. He's apparently he's like Ted, he's the closest thing to Ted Cruz in that he does not have a lot of pals apparently in the U.S. Senate. But Bill's absolutely right. If he isn't actually a Russian agent, he's sure trying to act.
Well,
like
he's a fan. I mean, I wouldn't call him.
I think I'm not even sure.
He
is. You didn't say that.
Until it's
but I'm
no
saying
longer
he is
politically expedient.
But
he's an
when did it become politically expedient to be a fan of Putin?
Wait, I was just about to say that.
Donald Trump.
Yeah, but
that's right.
Even Trump didn't embrace Putin after he started bombing hospitals and children's orphanages.
When Putin first went into Ukraine, if you remember, Trump said it's a genius move.
Right, and keep in mind we're talking about him because he's local.
Okay.
But people elsewhere are talking about him too.
Speaking of people able to get attention, let's talk about Patricia and Mark McCloskey of the Central West End, who in I think it was June of 2020 were arrested after they brandished firearms in front of their Central West End home, and they later pleaded guilty, Bill, to assault and harassment. And then just a couple weeks later, Mike Parson, the governor of Missouri, pardoned them. And they went in front of the judge, Joan Moriarty, and said, well, since we've been pardoned of our crimes, we want our firearms back, and we don't want to pay that fine. I think it was $750, something like that. Well, whose side are you on? She said, no, a deal's a deal. You copped a plea. You have to give up your firearm and pay the fine.
Well, I don't know what the law is about pardons, but it seems to me that if you're pardoned, you're pardoned. And so I think that they should be able to get their firearms back, and they should be reimbursed for the fine because they've been pardoned.
But now,
not that I like the McCloskeys, but they're pardoned.
Now, when you get pardoned, though, that is not excusing the act that you committed.
You have to admit to it.
You have to admit
You're
to it.
admitting guilt.
Yeah, so, yeah, there was a crime. The governor just said, like, nah, you know. So,
Right.
At
The
least-
governor has the power to pardon,
In this
and
case.
he pardoned them. And so I would say, okay, here's your guns back.
Well, obviously, I just, I don't know.
You're
It's interesting.
speechless, ladies and gentlemen. For the first time in
It's a
36
special-
years.
It's a special kind of pardon that you get before you actually were convicted of the crime. They basically announced he was going to pardon
Yes,
him
right.
before.
But they-
so I think that should factor in. But no, of course they shouldn't get their guns back. So they can menace people some more.
Let me ask you something. I'm a big fan of Brandon Bosley. I like him professionally and personally, but he released kind of a weird video last week when, during the coldest blizzard in 150 years or whatever it was, Alvin, he confronted a woman, and he claimed that she tried to carjack him. By the time we saw his video, she was lying on her side in the street saying nothing. He was brandishing a firearm. Where is the prosecutor going after him for brandishing a firearm?
Well, Missouri passes these laws
Yeah.
where if somebody looks at you the wrong way, you blow their head off.
Well, if that's the case, then why are Patricia and Mark McCloskey the center of attention?
Well, because they didn't go through the stand your ground, I guess. I don't know. I'm not making light of it.
No,
but
I mean, training your firearms on passersby who are peaceful protesters, I don't know that I didn't understand the whole thing with Boz. I don't have any opinion about that. But as Alvin points out, the record give you a gold medal now for just pointing a gun at somebody in the city. But that was an entirely, let's just say, racially challenged moment, and it was an embarrassing moment for a lot of.
Hey, I agree with that, but
No, I get your point. I got your point. I don't
Okay.
know.
What's
Ray
the
Hartmann,
point?
I want to ask you about the tax rates in the state of Missouri. They go from 5.3 to 4.95%. That's income tax next week.
Right.
Now, they're offset a little bit because our used cars are increasing in value, and as a result, our personal property taxes are going up. And we do have a pretty high sales tax in the state of Missouri. Get a Starbucks on Grand, it's 12%, believe it or not, sales tax. So, is it a big deal that they're lowering the income tax at this time? There's a $6 billion surplus in the coffers in Jeff City, mind you.
It's a big deal to people who rely on public education, who rely on the correctional system, who rely on social services, who rely on the State Department of Agriculture, the Highway Patrol, because regardless of the fact that they're sitting on a surplus, they have continued to underfund all those services. I don't think most people who are getting a slight, tiny decrease in their taxes are even noticing it.
And a low tax rate will be here after that $6 billion is gone, and that $6 billion is probably already gone, quite
Well, all
frankly.
the people are going to move into Missouri. I mean, come on.
They're coming.
Show
They're coming.
some vision.
Get ready.
And I know
Restaurants
that-
will be
I know that
expanding.
roads and bridges are gas tax, but is there any way to use this windfall for roads and bridges? Because we still are very near the bottom when it comes to our grade on roads and bridges.
Well, I think technically the legislature could vote the
They can do
exact
anything.
amount of money to come from the windfall that's not going to come in because of the tax cut.
I know you guys decry the 4.95%, but that's exactly the tax rate of the state of Illinois. That's the income tax rate in Illinois, 4.95%.
I don't
Remember,
decry.
a couple years ago, I thought you just said,
No, I
we'll
don't
lose
decry.
money.
I don't decry the tax rate. I decry the tax system that underfunds this state. In other
I would
words,
say the
you
same thing
can
about
pick apart
Missouri. I
any
mean
one
about
tax.
Illinois.
I'm talking about underfunded
Population,
state
maybe.
government. I'm not talking about any. I've always thought there should be a comprehensive examination of how the revenues are raised, but to be allergic to revenues and have such low services is the problem.
If Illinois cut their tax rate, I'd have the same problem with Illinois as I do here. I mean, it's a bigger state. They're probably more in the red
have
than
a lot
we
of-
are. But at the same time, I'd like, how on earth are you going to you know, cut taxes. I don't care
know.
what office you're running.
Right now,
Without, and you
I mean,
got to have you got to have what they call a pay for it in government. In other words, if you're going to cut taxes, fine, but you've got to have something to offset it other than cutting services, and that's the problem. Missouri empirically delivers. All 50 states deliver pretty much the same kinds of services, and when you rank near the bottom in so many, I don't think it's anything to be proud of, and as Alvin says, it's not a time to be cutting taxes, that's all.
You know, the funny thing to me, though, Ray, is the city and the county have combined almost $1 billion between the feds and the Kroenke money, and it doesn't seem like they can even spend it. We haven't even seen that Kroenke money being spent, except
That's
It will get
$500 million.
that's
It
not
will
a
get
lot of money.
spent, Charles.
I know, but if
It's
Ray's
not a lot of money in the
pointing
big
out about all
scheme
these
of
dire
things.
needs.
No,
Well, if there are dire needs, let's spend
It's got
the money.
nothing to
And
do with
I do
state
think-
government.
But we've been saying that for months.
I think a lot of it will go to infrastructure. I really do.
Yeah,
I really,
well,
I
I
hope
really
so.
do.
But that's got
Alvin
nothing to do
Reid.
with state government.
Alvin Reid, there's a Cardinal fan in Clinton County who went to Pittsburgh to try and catch the 703rd home run by Albert Pujols in his legendary streak this year. And he caught it, which is absolutely amazing.
Barehanded.
Barehanded. And I think he was caught on video. But then he tried to authenticate it in Pittsburgh, and nobody inside the stadium did it. He went outside, went home with the ball, came back the next day, and they said, well, once it leaves the field to play, we can't authenticate it. And so he could lose hundreds of thousands of dollars because potential buyers will not be convinced that the ball that he has is the actual 703rd home run. Do you feel sorry for the guy?
I absolutely do. And then, as you explained to me, I know that during the chase for any record in Major League Baseball, they have like what do you call them? A hieroglyphic.
Oh, hologram.
Yeah,
Hologram.
hologram
Yeah.
on there, and that designates exactly, you know, that this baseball is for real. And they stopped at 700. Like Albert Pujols wasn't going to play anymore after he hit 700. I mean, first of all, that's stupid on Major League Baseball's part, so I think they're part to blame. Two, how do you authenticate it in the ballpark? You know, like if there's no logo on it or anything, I can say, hey, I caught it. That's like, man, that was a white dude that caught the ball. You know? No, it was the shadows. Right.
I got some initials here.
What I loved was the fact that, didn't he say that the estimate was like $300 and some odd thousand, and he said that that was not life-altering, and that he, or life-changing,
Right.
and that he was not interested in selling until it was life-changing
But
money.
no, you know why? Hey,
he's all right
That
then.
was like he was on the telegraph machine to Albert Pujols. Like, tick, 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 tick. I really don't care about the money. Tick, 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 tick.
I got
you know, yeah.
So
right.
you do feel bad for a guy
I
who's there,
do.
a fan trying to capitalize?
Yeah, but it's
Well,
old
sure.
school. Like years ago, these balls weren't authenticated, and whoever caught the ball, you know, they weren't selling it on eBay. It was just a little souvenir for themselves.
Yeah, I've never understood why people do that. I mean, pay that much as it is, but I guess, I don't, whatever. I'm with
Well, Wendy Wiese, our last topic. What were the big stories, in your opinion, in 2022? Like the story that resonated more than others?
I still think it was the fall of Louis Reid, and I think that really surprised me. I know it shouldn't have, because it's politics. It's part and parcel when it comes to the political realm, but that did surprise me, and I think the Mantovani run, the Catherine Pinner and Shamed Dogan, that was just absolutely off the boil. So those two stories, I think, for me, would have been the top.
I think tragically the big story in St. Louis was the Central Visual and Performing Arts school shooting, which is, we're so numb to all the killings, but this was, I believe, the first school shooting we've had of all time. And in the county, I'd say that I was going to say the Catherine Pinner episode, but I think it's kind of 1 and 1A with the chief of staff getting caught having sex in the office.
That too.
And then
That's
at
St.
the
Louis County
state,
Executive.
I do think importantly the state, even again we forget,
It's
keep
chief of
perspective.
staff.
The state was legalizing pot. Was the
Oh
big
yeah,
story.
that too.
Okay, I think those obviously are really the two top ones. I would say that our bordering state of Kansas and the vote they took in August was the first kind of signal of what was going to happen in November in that this red tidal wave, and it's kind of like parts of America are saying enough is enough, and I think that was kind of here.
Okay, and I would go the nostalgic route. I thought you leaving KMOX was a big deal. It leaves just Kevin Killeen there. I mean, the old KMOX is gone, and I thought the St. Louis Police Department going outside of the department for a new leader was also kind of a staggering thing.
Yeah.
I mean, for the entire history of the department, they've picked from within. So I thought those two things show, for good or bad, real change.
And may I say, happy anniversary to you and Mary on this 29th day
Yes.
of December, Bill McClellan.
Thank you very much. It's 43 years.
43
all right.
years.
Hey, let's go to the old mailbag and see what folks had to say about last week's program. Why are we restricting people under 18 from drag shows when you can watch RuPaul almost anytime on cable? That from Glenn Fowler. Thanks, Glenn, for that letter. Michael Shazinski wrote, only Ray could possibly find nothing wrong with the former owner of the notorious Rain nightclub, Dana Kelly, who still owes over $700,000, landing a job in Kim Gardner's office. Michael, thank you. Lori McGinley of St. Charles wrote, yes, there is a bike trail from the St. Louis Arch to the Chain of Rocks Bridge. It needs to be repaved. Please. Thank you, Lori. You can write us care of 9 PBS, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Don't forget those emails and those tweets. Use that hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Call the 9 line at 314-512-9094 and listen to us on your favorite podcast source. They would be Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and TuneIn. Little program note tomorrow night. It's the last broadcast for St. Louis in the Know, hosted by Ray Hartmann, so you want to hear that tomorrow night on KTRS after 4 great years. Congratulations, Ray. And we'll see you next week as we begin our 37th year. Folks, have a happy new year. Thanks for joining us. See you in 7 days.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9 PBS.